Thank you very much for listening to this week's talk as we are approaching the festival of Pesach and the unusual circumstance of Pesach, the Pesach being on Motzei Shabbat. So the 14th of Nisan, which is erev Pesach, falls out actually on Shabbat. And we are dedicating this learning for the speedy and safe release of all of the hostages in Gaza and the safety and security of all of the soldiers in the IDF. And I think that when we look at the themes, the unusual presentation of the calendar this year and the themes of community and individuals, I think we can really weave all the threads together and find such special relevance to what we're going through at the moment, but also linking us to some fascinating facts about history-changing events that happened about 100 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, and how actually this is something that we are going to be able to learn from on a continuing basis. What I'm referring to is that when there was a situation about 100 years before the destruction of the Second Temple, that Pesach fell in the way that it falls this year. And the leaders of the community at that time were three brothers called Bnei Betera, the sons of Betera. And there was a problem in the temple times with the fact that 14th of Nisan was on a Shabbat. The Bnei Betera did not know whether they could bring the Korban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan, as one is required to do, because in theory, one violates Shabbat when one brings a Korban. And they heard that somebody called Hillel the Bavli, that is Hillel of the fame in Pirkei Avot, Hillel the sage, Hillel the elder, he knew the answer to this question. And he gave the answer that one actually is allowed to bring the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering on Shabbos, that the requirement to bring the Pesach offering would actually override one of the very limited exceptions that overrides the various prohibitions of activity that we cannot do on Shabbat. And because he had the answer, the Bnei Betera, who were the leaders of the community, said they are not going to be the leaders anymore. They are the position should go to Hillel. And as a result, we had in position as leader the famous sage Hillel, and we have various quotations in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, and Hillel, together with Shammai, established centers of learning and excellence, and Hillel's philosophy and his practical halachic, his halachic innovations. He was the one who instituted the special document called the Prosbol that enabled people to buy and sell land before the Shemitah year in a way that wasn't going to stop people from carrying out commercial activity because of the approaching Shemitah and Yovel year. So his innovations in halacha, and also Hillel is very famous for an approach that was so universal and embracing. The famous story is told of when a non-Jewish person came to Hillel and said, "Teach me the Torah standing on one foot." And Shammai couldn't have patience for what he deemed such a senseless question. Yet Hillel gave the answer, "V'ahavta l'recha kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. Just everything else, or rather he used the version of what is hateful unto you, do not do to somebody else. Everything else is commentary. And his very, very embracing attitude towards people, and the way that he would find the halachic the halachic route to allow certain things rather than to prohibit them. And this is really the history. Jewish history was changed by having a leader such as Hillel. And what precipitated Hillel to this position of leadership was the fact that the festival of Pesach fell out exactly as it falls out this year, which meant that the then leaders were not able to reconcile, to answer this question. Now, the puzzle is that really it shouldn't have been such a perplexing problem, because we have already the fact that we have the daily offerings, the Korban Tomid, and also the Musaf offering, and these were offerings that were brought on Shabbat. So we had a precedent for the bringing of offerings on Shabbat already. So why did this cause such consternation? Why was it something that these great sages, the sons of Betera, were not able to answer? And the reason that is suggested is that the difficulty was, do we classify the Paschal offering, the offering of the Paschal lamb, as a communal sacrifice or as an individual sacrifice? Because communal sacrifices that have to be brought at a certain time, like, for example, the Tamid, the daily offering, and also the Musaf offering, those do override Shabbat. So that's not in doubt. What was in doubt is how do we define the bringing of the Korban Pesach? And there are elements of both, because on the one hand, you have to be part of a group to bring the Korban Pesach. You couldn't just bring it individually. You couldn't bring it. Everybody had to almost register as part of a group in order to be able to partake of the Paschal offering, the part of the Pesach offering. But equally, it wasn't a communal offering. It was really something that each individual had to make sure that they signed up to the group, but it was incumbent on the individual rather than the whole community. And it was not funded by the half a shekel offering that was the donation that funded the communal offerings. And so really the difficulty was understanding that how do we define a communal offering and how do we define an individual offering, and what is the consequence and the importance of that for us as a Jewish community. And really Hillel was able to understand that we need, as a people, we need to balance the obligations to be part as part of a community on the one hand, and our individuality. And these two can sometimes contradict and compete in ways that are irreconcilable. But what Hillel is doing is he's saying that when we classify the Paschal offering as a communal offering, he is saying that we have to, without losing our individuality, we need, on this anniversary of our birth as a nation, because really the events of coming out of Egypt, and especially the bringing of the Korban Pesach, is a time that we need to bring our own specific talents on the one hand, yet on the other hand, we need to do so as part of the group. And Hillel really understood that. And when the Bnei Betera were aware of how they were not actually able to classify and to define this, they handed over the leadership to Hillel. And this is something that was history changing for the Jewish people. And so when we look at this particular year and how we are able to think of it, not just as a quirk of the calendar, and before the calendar was fixed, it would have happened much more often, and that actually was something else that Hillel did. He fixed the calendar at a time when uh, the the whole process of defining the new moon, uh, getting the witnesses, and the process that had to be followed was endangered because of the various persecutions and challenges to that, and that would have had very disastrous consequences for when all our festivals and all our calendar is regulated. So by fixing it, Hillel again was looking into the future and coming up with an incredible solution, a very mathematically challenging solution to no longer being able to rely on the eyewitness of those people who had actually seen the new moon and then were able to send the messages to get to the Sanhedrin to actually declare the new month. So just to the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that is said in Hillel's name, that really sums up the intricacies of this dispute and how Hillel was able to combine the ideas of individual and communal offerings and show how the Korban Pesach was, although it has elements of both, but actually it needs to be classified in this unique situation as a communal offering, which will allow it to be brought on Shabbos. And we are celebrating that particular event as this year when we have the Pesach falling exactly in that way. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that is so pertinent and really sums up Hillel's philosophy and why he was worthy of becoming leader on the back of this particular historical debate that happened when Pesach turned out like this. That is in chapter 1 of Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avot, Mishnah 14. Hu haya omer, he used to say, and this he refers to Hillel, im ein anili mili, if I am not for myself, who am I? Uchasha'ani la'atzmi ma'ani, and when I am just for myself, what am I? For imlo achshav emosai, and if not now, then when? And just looking at this three-part Mishnah and the incredible balance that it really achieves of showing how, on the one hand, I need to respect my individuality. That is the first part. Im einanili mili. Hashem has created me with my unique makeup, and I have a mission that only I can fulfill. And if I don't do that, who is going to do that? So that is really underscoring the value of the individual. But then we could say, yes, and so the individual offerings, the korbanot that were brought as an individual, yes, they were hugely important. They could only be brought by an individual, like, for example, the Thanksgiving offering, the korban todah, or the korban nazir, the special offering that the Nazarite brought, and two examples. And then the next section, kashan anila atzmi ma'ani. If I'm only thinking of myself, if all of my focus is only going to be on what is for my benefit, ultimately, what am I? Because once I have exhausted the limits and the possibilities of my mission in life, then I need to move onwards and outwards. I need to be able to think of a community. Yes, I need to establish a firm identity in order to do that very well. But then I do need to move on. There is a second stage. And this really, linking this idea with defining the bringing of the Korban Pesach with its individual elements, but really part of Am Yisrael, part of the nation of Israel, and everybody, old people, young people, women, children. There was no limit to only a higher class of priests being part of this experience. And also you can all of the mitzvahs of the Seder, for example, of Korban Pesach, are positive mitzvahs that are time bound. So in theory, women are exempt from that. But again, because this is part of a community, of a nation, the women are just as much obligated as everybody else. And when Moshe Rabbeinu is negotiating with Paro, and he's saying, and Paro is saying, oh yes, the men can go, but the women and children have to stay behind, or the young people can go, but the old people will stay behind. And Moshe says, no, everybody has to come. This is a national festival. This is a national pilgrimage that we are going to make. And again, this is part of the idea of the importance of the community that was established at this time. And then the concluding part, the imlo achshav emosai, and if not now, then when? And really, that was the debate that was raging around whether we can, on the 14th of Nisan, which falls on a Shabbos, whether we can bring the sacrifice. And the answer was given, yes, it did have to be brought on the 14th of Nisan. It had to be brought erev Pesach, and therefore that was the decision. And that was the decision that brought Hillel into the position of leadership. He had come from Babylon, from Bavel, and when he was 40 years old, and the stories of his poverty and the sacrifices that he had to make to become a Torah scholar are legendary. At one point, he couldn't afford the small fee to get into the Bet Midrash, and so he climbed up onto a skylight onto the roof of the Bet Midrash so he could listen like that. And he froze over because it was so cold outside, and they saw that the skylight had been blocked, and so they realized that someone was up there, and the people brought him down and revived him. And those were the middle 40 years of his life. And then the last 40 years of his life, he lived till 120, with many similarities with Moshe Rabbeinu, as well as that duration of his lifespan. And these were the last 40 years of his working as the prince, as the nasi, and bringing these halachic and hashkafic philosophical wisdom and decisions into the corpus of Jewish law and Jewish thinking. And really, this is something that is shown in. We have the time and the opportunity to concentrate on this particular story and the greatness that was displayed by Hillel in the case of this particular question that happened just when Pesach worked out as it does this year. And as we find with everything in Torah, these are lessons that are eternally applicable, and we can find that balance. We can look at this area of problem that wasn't straightforward, that great leaders had chose to step down and give over their leadership to somebody who they realized was actually better able to understand the issues and better able to give a decision that was going to show the importance of combining individuality on the one hand and community on the other hand, through the lens of bringing the Korban Pesach when erev Pesach is on Shabbos. And please God, everybody should be able to celebrate the Pesach just as it was in the time of Hillel, in the time of the temple, that all our prayers should be answered. This should be a festival of liberation for everybody, for all of the Jewish people. And please God, we should be able to celebrate with the coming of Moshiach. Wishing everybody a Shabbat Shalom and Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Thank you very much for listening.